Hello and welcome to the first Randomizing Gamer TruePlay video. I'm Random Gamer Riven.
And I'm Random Gamer Dragoon.
And together for the next hour and a half we'll be playing through and commentating on the Sega 32X game Kolibri. Now, for those of you who don't know what a 32X was, it was an expansion for the Sega Mega Drive or the Sega Genesis, depending in which region of the world you live. Now here we go with the start. This is one of these games that there's no introduction, no nothing, it's just straight into game. Indeed, it's a little bit, when you first play this, even I wasn't too sure what to do. You can often spend like about 30 minutes flying around this section, trying to find out what you're supposed to do, as you can see here. However, of course, I've played this before, so I'm just quickly showing you the environments as I flew around a bit. But as you can see, the other hummingbirds don't want me to drink nectars from any of the flowers. So I find this plant, a little Kolibri. And this plant turns out kind of to be like the poison apple, because as soon as he drinks nectar from it, the world seems to go bad. Well, actually, technically not true. As he's drinking nectar at that point in time, an alien invader is coming to attack the planet, and this crystal is giving Kolibri its dying power, so he has to now go and save the world. Everyone has to be saved by a hummingbird, possibly one of the smallest creatures on the planet.
Okay, now, what happens is you split into two, and the player 1 is the purple hummingbird, player 2 is the green hummingbird. One difference between single player and multiplayer is that as you collect these power-ups, you can see us collecting now, we're trying to level up our weapons. In single player, the hummingbird changes colour depending on which power-up you get, so whether you get the laser or the long-range shots. In multiplayer, you both stay as a fixed colour. So what we're trying to do here is we collect each orb has 3 levels of power up. You want to collect each orb 3 times, that way you've got the maximum level.
Now I should point out that I'm Riven and I'm the red and purpley bird from Dragoon here.
Green bird.
Yes, indeedy. Now, basically, the reason we collect the power-ups multiple times is you've got 3 levels, so you need to collect each power-up 3 times to gain it, to increase it to the maximum level. If you collect an alternative power-up, however, it swaps the weapon and doesn't increase the level, so you have to collect the same power-up 3 times. Now, this is the first stage. It's actually really short, and all we're doing is you'll notice there are a couple of grey plants. Basically, as we kill the enemies, the hummingbirds, the plant returns to colour, and then the hummingbirds come and start drinking the nectar. Now, the enemies are primarily insects and bugs. There's a few sort of alien bugs as well.
But yeah, the bulk of your game sees you find sort of bees, wasps, and there are a few bigger enemies like scorpions and snakes at the very last sort of couple of levels. Now these yellow rings we're seeing here actually act as a shield, so you can take an extra hit. You actually have a health bar system as such. You've probably already seen them, but those black orbs that fly around with like little yellow orbs flying around, and those are health power-ups. You can see one on screen now. The hummingbirds that appear around you indicate your health status. 4 hummingbirds means you're at maximum health. As you take damage, you'll get less than this. You get 3, 2, 1, and then obviously you take another hit after that, you're toast.
Now, apologies, but as this is the 30 frames upload to YouTube, it has lost some of the flicker effects. Now, and the only way I've seen to be able to fix that is if I put the game at a really weak frame rate, which I don't really want to do because it makes the video really unsmooth. But the source video is fine, everything's working correctly because we recorded directly, but at the minute YouTube doesn't support 60 frames a second. When it does, I will re-upload this video, so that way we get the full frame rate, but until then, I'm just going to sit on this thing. And you're going to have to make do with the 30 frame rate limited one.
Now, the objective of this level is you need to restore the plant, so as each time you shoot those wasps around the plant, you notice it starts to restore colour to them. Obviously, we're going around killing the wasps and picking up various health power-ups they drop on them.
Yeah, this is actually one of the easier bits. Bizarrely, this plant system's only in some of the earlier stages. A lot of the later levels, you don't have to do this stuff. It's interesting, the objective per levels, they change. Some levels are the same. I mean, the end objective is always to clear the level. Stupid question, of course, but most they have sort of different sub-objectives. Some levels have guardians, some levels require you to break special bricks, other levels require you to free the plants from the insects. Some levels are just literally just to get to the end of them. There's some auto-scrolling levels, which you'll see later on. Other levels require a bit more brain power, you have to figure out what to do and how to destroy the obstacles ahead of you.
And just to mention, this is recorded directly from the 32X. We're using the Elgato Game Capture HD device. It's plugged into a 32X. We're capturing via composite because that's the best way you can capture via the Mega Drive. Unfortunately, although the Mega Drive does support RGB SCARTs, which gives you the best image, the Elgato doesn't support that. The Elgato does support S-Video with an adapter you can buy, but unfortunately the Mega Drives themselves don't output S-Video unless you heavily modify them. So.
Yeah, we don't want to go around mucking around with the content at this stage, especially seeing as RGB is better. There's not actually much point in us modding the Mega Drive to output S-Video, because I've actually contacted Elgato and I'm kind of hoping they might add in RGB SCART support for the Game Capture HD. So we'll just have to wait and see. But I have actually put in a request, and by all means, if you use an Elgato and you want RGB SCART support, just send a nice little email just saying, hey guys, I really like your product, please will you consider adding RGB SCART support?
Because RGB is the best output most of the old consoles can give. I mean,
yeah, it's weird, I've only recently discovered SNES can actually do component when modded, so that's actually very, very good, although RGB SCART is by far the best on the old CRTs.
Instantly here we're drinking them. You'll notice some of the plants have like little drops coming out of them. That's an indication that you can actually drink from them by pressing A, and you can get power-ups and other bonuses from them.
It's weird though that that functionality is only available in these early levels because you only see plants in these early levels. The later levels there are no plants whatsoever. I should just point out like some of the weapons we're using at the minute. Okay, that was actually, this is like a little guardian boss thing. Now you'll notice that a lot of the time we're using the laser or the homing beams like these ones, where basically you just shoot and lock onto the enemies. They are a godsend. Some of the weapons are a little bit weird and don't work particularly well, but the homing beams work brilliant, especially because there's an awful lot of enemies that will get killed that you don't see on screen, like here. You'll just see explosions as we're flying around because we've just killed the enemy prior to them even arriving. It also helps you avoid taking damage as well. This game does get trickier later on.
Now those toads you can sometimes see on the stages, they are actually enemies, they're not just background graphic. If you fly too close to them, they will eat you and kill you instantly, so you do want to be very wary of them.
Are they toads or frogs?
One of the two.
Yeah, we're leaving that as the undecided unless one of us can officially work out the difference between a frog or a toad. I just know toads tend to be fatter, and I've seen plenty in the garden, so...
Yeah, it probably is a toad, actually.
Okay, this, in case you're wondering what we're doing here, these sections here, those monsters are basically guardians, and we can't kill them until we've killed all the little minions that are flying around. It's not actually that clear when you're playing it. The first time you sort of fly up to them and they start attacking you, you're like, why can't I kill them? And as you see there, the minute you kill the last minions, they then actually start attacking you, so then you can gun them down. They get smaller as well once you can actually attack them. And when they die, they drop loads of power-ups.
I mean, the initial levels, some of the earlier levels in this are more sort of open worldy. Some of the later levels you do get a sort of scrolling level later on.
I mean, as you can see from this video, the graphics are stunning. It does look amazing, even when you play it for real, it just looks stunning considering the fact it's a 16-bit console with a 32-bit add-on device. The only thing I'm not overly impressed with is the 32X, the sound quality. Kolibri does have quite a good soundtrack, but I'll be honest, the 32X, the sound quality is not a patch on the Saturn or PlayStation's audio.
Even the SNES audio arguably sound better.
Yeah, I mean, SNES, sort of Sony made the chips, so... Although it seems ironic that the Saturn had better sound than the PlayStation, despite the fact the SNES had better sound than the Mega Drive.
Now that larger bubble with the hummingbird in it that you can probably see, that is another bubble that's exclusive to two-player. Basically, when one of you dies, if the other person touches that bubble, they will revive the other player, so it's always worth keeping your eye out for them if you're low on health and you've only one of you left. Now, throughout the level, this is the level infestation, this is the first scrolling level, basically like just a traditional side-scrolling shooter. You go across
and kill everything on sight. Basically blow everything up is the name of the game. As you can see there, another little Kolibri bubble. Later on we do use them a lot because later on we did get killed quite a few times. There were some tight moments later on trying to survive to the end of each level. We do die occasionally. We have cut out any cuts where we just die completely. I think in total the video was just under 2 hours. but this edited one will just taken out a few of the complete death runs where we just died and nothing else. I'll perhaps save all the death runs for a later random gaming outtake video later on, where you can laugh at us screwing up spectacularly.
These are obviously some of the easier levels in the game. They're nice and quick, short. They remind you of a traditional shooter, but they're not particularly challenging. And obviously, you've got the level 3 power up. You can hose down most of the enemies.
We didn't die on any one of these. We played these all through. Not one of these we died on. The scrolling levels are really, really easy.
And the arrow marker always indicates the end of the level. Now, obviously, this level is called Expiry, and if you are watching the video, you will have noticed by now the password comes up every time we get to a new level. So you can pause this video at any point, take all the passwords down, and then you can go get to any level within the game yourself, rather than having just to watch it. So if you are lucky enough to own a copy of this, because this game had quite a limited release.
Well, it's really rare. It's quite hard to track down. I should say it's hard. I hate the word rare. I'm not going to say rare again. It's hard to track down, and it's a bit pricey. For the European release, it's quite expensive. The US release is a lot more common. I think this is much more heavily printed because the US was the 32X was much more US driven because it was actually developed in the US, from what I understand. So there are a lot more. The US is a lot commoner. In Europe, it's quite uncommon, as with the Japan. It wasn't that popular either. In fact, there's a few games. So T-Mech is, although the US version, I've actually got a US copy of T-Mech, is really common and it even works on the PAL 32X. The PAL version of 32X is very, very, very hard to find, and it's crazy how rare T-Mech is. The PAL version is absolutely insane.
Okay, so here we are, we're battling against the winds to get through this area.
Yeah, pressing C button to burst, so you fly forward at this point. That's why, and you can see like the wind effects. It's not that clear in the video, but we're struggling against winds there.
You just briefly saw a chameleon. They act similar to a toad, but unlike the toad, who will kill you instantly, the chameleon has a longer tongue and will wheel you in before dragging you out. So you can actually escape the chameleon's tongue, whereas the toad, he's got you. Those are sort of DNA strands throughout the game. You find them. They don't appear to, not entirely sure what they do. They don't really seem to have any effect on the game, and certainly this game doesn't have a score-based system, so you don't really have your scoring.
Right, you also see the rain coming down, the little droplets. They are very tricky. Admittedly, the smaller ones are okay. You get bigger ones that instantly KO your bird, so it's like, ugh. There's a few sections where you have to play really, really carefully. There's a few where we will get killed by them, because they are really hard to dodge at points. In case we were just flying around this way, we weren't exactly sure which way to go to escape the area, so we were trying to fly around. I can't remember.
There we go. There we got grabbed by a chameleon and managed to escape from it.
Oh, that's right. We're looking for the bombs at this point.
Yeah, we did have them, but I believe I'd fired them off. So basically, we come to this side.
We go back up and collect the bombs. Yeah, this is a slightly longer than expected run for this stage, as we struggle to find out what to do. It was actually the first stage we have to use the bombs, so once we'd done it once, we knew exactly what to do. The first time round, there are a few stages like this where we were like, what do you do here? What am I supposed to be doing?
I had completed this game a few years earlier, but obviously it's been quite a long time since we played.
I had completed this game a few years. That's me, Riven. I've completed. Dragoon has not finished this game before, I should point out, and it's been years and years since I played through it. So my memory of it was, there's a final boss, you shoot things, it's good, it looks pretty, and that was about it. Oh, and there was one horrible stage that I hated.
These are the bombs here that you have to use to destroy the rocks. They're used through a number of levels throughout the game, and they are quite irritating. You tap A to use them, but you only have a finite number of them. And indeed, in some areas of the game, you'll have a number stored up. You might use one to shoot the rocks, but when you pass a certain barrier, you will then discharge all of them anyway. So then you have to find another lot in the next area. You can't, once you find them, you can't actually keep them stored. So back to where the rocks are this time, double tap A, bang.
Oh yeah, and you got killed at that point. I forget. I just missed that where you died. But yeah, you were dead. But every time you start a new stage, but you both get revived as well.
This is another scrolling level, meta station.
This was a really long scrolling level, and you basically go. You see the start here. The exit's actually to the right, but for some reason, instead of going just right, you go up and around and back down and back up again and back around, and finally you finish the level. So this one's actually quite irritating. Not only that, it's the previous level. You're just flying around it now on a preset route. It's actually really, really lazy. It's actually an interesting game design aspect. They've created a new level using an existing level. A bit like Halo, where you played the entire game backwards to try and increase the length. There are a few levels where they do that in this as well, but not too many. This is one of the few.
I mean, this is basically a sort of way to extend the game with developer tactics. I mean, there are lots of tactics developers use to drag out games. Obviously, reusing boss fights being a classic example. So we just reuse the assets from the previous level, and you'll fly around it fixed this time.
Yep, this is my favourite gun attack, by the way. This is the one we were using for the majority of the game, because again it does home, and it's just like, yep, shoot the enemies.
There is another homing attack, but you don't get that too much later in the game.
Yeah, there's three, I think. You've got the laser beams, this ball attack, and then there's an alternative blue ball attack. And there's also one that's quite cool one that bounces off the walls. It's really, really cool. And there's a couple of other attacks we didn't use that much. There's the scatter shot, and there's also... Let me just think about this just a moment. There's the tiny shot that sort of fills up behind you and then shoots. It's quite novel, but it's not that fast firing, so I try to avoid it. It's weird, there's a bug with that one. If you charge up the shot and then swap weapon, the charged shot will remain behind you even though you changed weapon. I didn't see too many bugs. There were a few early on. One level the game tried to push you up, but if you kept flying along quick enough, you could see incorrect graphics from where they hadn't quite done the design properly.
Now again, that flower just shot up is similar to the toad. If you get too close to it, it will suck you in, and it's good night for the end.
Oh, and you just nope. You keep going invisible though. I forget YouTube frame rate. Raw YouTube.
Before, this is captured directly from a 32X. We're not using some hack-eyed ROM from the internet, as many people will do with many of their videos. They just take an emulated version.
I'm interested for anyone who is a big Sega fan. If you listen to the video on this, because this is a real 32X, the sound is certainly noticeably different to the emulated version. I mean, I have played this on emulated, and the sound in this is much clearer. I noticed there's a lot more reverb effects from what I thought, but I'd be interested to know how much difference for those guys who are much more, because although we do play quite a bit of Mega Drive, I'm not a huge Mega Drive fan. I myself, Riven, was a SNES fan during the 16-bit era, but
and the chameleon just gulp you down, so that's what happens if you don't get out of his way, but there's another bird bubble to revive him quickly. So.
Yep, that was me getting used.
Incidentally, that round laser shot is the default shot for the players. Whenever you die and get revived, that is the shot you will have.
Oh yes, that's by far one of the worst attacks in the game. It's got no range and no flexibility.
See, a lot of levels there tend to be two types of sort of structured enemies in these games. Enemies that fly around and shoot you, and just like big dudes, big sort of creatures that sit on a location, lash out and try and eat you.
Oh, there you go, taken out by the big drops of the thing area. But yeah, there are big creatures. Some of the big ones sort of will lash out. Some just seem to be pre-scripted. Others home on you. There's a couple that chase you down to the bitter end. And this is the worst attack in the game. I remember having this bit at this point, just like, get me to the end, because I think I'm on like one hit at this point, although you can't see it properly.
Yeah, again, it's the lack of 60 frames per second. Your headache. It's surprising that a lot of modern consoles don't do 60 frames in games, yet the SNES, NES and all that did. So.
Yeah, it's a bit weird. A lot of said about even the PS4 and the Xbox One, a few of their games aren't doing 60 frames a second, yet the NES, Mega Drive, Super Nintendo all did 60 frames a second as standard. I think it's sort of Saturn and PlayStation era, they dropped to 30 frames for some games.
So as you can see, these are the sort of, this game sort of has a sort of 3 sort of structured background environments. You have the sort of forest at the start of the game. Now as you move further into the game, you get these sort of darkened cave stages. There are then some more darkened cave stages and a darker forest later on. And finally you end with the sort of temple sections.
You're forgetting the Egyptian style levels. Sort of, there's a few arid levels. It's not quite barren desert, it's sort of arid locations where you've got a lot less vegetation. Basically you sort of go top ground, underground, top ground, underground, top ground, underground in terms of level progression.
These cave levels are probably some of the duller in the game. The environment just isn't that vibrant.
Yeah, they're kind of open world in some aspects, but they're just quite boring. They don't inspire a lot, and I mean, you can take the nice pictures, but you don't get that many great shots from them. It's one of the few areas where I think the art style slightly lets it down. Because throughout most of the game, it's absolutely beautiful, certainly to start with all the water effects. Now, one thing I will say about this is, I'm surprised Sega didn't port it to the Sega Saturn. I mean, it seems a surefire thing. The 32X hadn't done that well. I don't know why they didn't port this, Dark Sides, and a few of the other games they did.
Even
that
Chaotix.
Yeah, you're right, Chaotix. I don't know why they didn't port that to the Sega Saturn as well. There's a few games, Star Wars 32X, I don't know why they didn't just say, right, quickly port them to the Sega Saturn.
Maybe it could be to do with hardware tech, but supposedly they did use similar components. Okay, the Saturn supposedly had more processing power, but it would have been nice. Certainly these games would have been available to a larger audience if they'd had Saturn ports. Whereas they are only available to a very select audience who own a Mega Drive and a 32X and have got the money to hunt down these copies because they're not easy to get and not cheap either.
Yeah, they kind of, since eBay came along, the prices have skyrocketed in recent years. Originally, 32X games, you would see them regular-ish. It's just they were just quite hard to find, but they were out and they were usually about £10-15. Then along came the internet, everything went crazy.
Okay, so we're back on the surface world now. As you get the theme, this is the infected plane, so whereas before we had sort of nice, vibrant planes, it's starting to show the sign that the sort of environment is slowly becoming diseased by the crystal that's attacked the planet. Well, that's according to the manual.
You always read out the manual tech while we're doing. This is the kind of arid environment I was explaining, you see later on. Again, this is a pre-scrolling level, so basically we're just following the path.
I mean, the exact blurb from the back of the power box is: the world's karma has been disrupted by the arrival of 2 menacing crystals crashing through the atmosphere. As they begin turning creatures and plants into evil monsters, Kolibri, a beautiful hummingbird, must return nature to normal. You must help by guiding him through a stunning world of polygon graphics and 3D perspectives to save the Earth from destruction.
Does it actually say polygon and 3D graphics?
That's a strange terminology for a 2D sprite-based.
Maybe someone who worked on this can explain if this game is 3D in some way, but from what I see, the game is entirely... I'm just actually going to read that again. I've not actually read this before. You must help by guiding him through a stunning world of polygon graphics and 3D perspectives to save the Earth from destruction. I don't know about you, but that's trade descriptions to me. Oh, you gotta love UK law. Yes, 3D perspectives, I don't see any. Polygon graphics, I don't see any. I just see beautiful hand-drawn 2D graphics. Now, maybe my eyes are deceiving me, but this looks like 2D to me.
As far as I'm aware, the only thing that might be polygon is later on there's a couple of health power-ups that are trapped in sort of rotating cages. That's the only time where I can think there's any kind of use of 3D graphics.
Yeah, it shows you how often I read the blurb on the back of the box. At least not like US Sega Saturn box. I remember a couple of them like Shiny Force 3 where they just put out and out lies on the back of the box just to try and sell it.
It's level 8, by the way. The 19 stages.
there 19 stages?
Yeah, 19
1,
stages.
2, 3, 4, 5. Ah, well, no, technically the first level doesn't. There is 20.
Yeah.
There's one before Rescue. But just in case you want to know, the levels in chronological order, I think is Rescue, Eruption, Infestation, Expiry, Metastasis, New Infection, Deep Seeding, Plains Infection, Terra Lesions, Terra Decay, Cold Entrance, Dark Cavity, Dark Obstruction, To the Light, Infection Forest, Old World Infection, Penetration, Extraction, Remission. Now, some of you may find some of those names slightly funny. They are a bit odd, that's what I will say. Now, this level is actually quite interesting. See that creature in front of us? We have to follow him to the end of the stage without getting in front of him, or else he'll attack us. And the reason we need him to follow him is because at the end of the stage, you need him to unlock a door for you. Now, he actually appears in a couple of levels, and he can be a bit tricky sometimes to follow without getting in his way. In one of the later levels, you will see us screw up spectacularly near the end, as we literally were just below the door, and then I flew in front of him, and then it all went a bit crazy as he started trying attacking us.
One of the most irritating factors with the 32X games, they all came, certainly the early games came in a lot, that sort of cardboard box. I mean, even our own copy, the cardboard box is quite worn and ripped. And they do tend to, whatever you find them, they do tend to look like they've had a bit of a bash. The game itself is copyright 95.
Yep, and as you can see there, we kind of hit a slight snag in interrupting. I think now he follows him down. Yep, there he goes. There the door opens, and we follow him into the underground again.
As we said earlier, this game does have a theme of going above ground, going back underground.
Okay, so this is Cold Entrance, the next stage, and this is another underground one. Again, this is quite a dark and dingy stage. And then that's Dragoon getting bumped off. I'm not a big fan of, as I said before, I'm not a big fan of these stages. They are a little bit dark and dark. I should point out I appear to be suffering from a teeny bit of hay fever, so you may hear the odd bit of heavy breathing. I'm going to try and remove any of it from the video, but there might be the odd bit or two. Now, this stage was us being numpties. See that thing there we just blew up? You're supposed to use it to destroy the gateway to get out, but as you will see, we spend about 5 minutes flying around backwards to try and do it. Now, I didn't want to cut it because I thought, no, it would look a bit naff if I start skipping sections. So yes, this is just us for the odd moment or two, still trying to figure out what to do. And there are some interesting puzzle sections in how the level structure is made. It's actually quite nice to actually have a shooter where there are some puzzle sections. There aren't too many shooters. I know there's a few shooter games like Twinkle Star Spirits that are predominantly puzzle games, but there aren't many where you actually have puzzle sections. This is a far more intelligent man's shooter. But it's arguable, is this a shooter or is this more sort of a adventure game? Although I hate the generic term adventure, it doesn't quite mean anything. It's more, I'm trying to describe this other than shooter. I mean, it's kind of like an open world shooter.
Well, it's a sort of adventure, sort of exploration. I mean, obviously it was made by the same people that did Echo the Dolphin, and this is probably the closest you'll get to a third Echo that was in 2D, assuming you don't count Echo Junior, in which case it'd be the fourth one.
Of course, there was a fourth game, Echo, on the Dreamcast, but I'm not actually a huge fan of the Echo series. I always found them a bit dry. I just found them a little bit boring. I much preferred Kolibri. I think this is a much better game than all the Echo games they ever did. I just prefer it.
It does have some sort of spirit of Echo in the fact that it's more open worldy, and I suppose from a personal perspective I've always preferred games that are a bit more structured, so certainly games where you're a little bit confused as to where to go to start.
Oh, there's a nice little scorpion there. Yes, this dark cavity, this is probably one of the longer levels, and it's again one of the more boring ones. There's a few more underground levels. There's a really hard one coming up that was absolutely aggravating to play through, but it's now, I don't know whether we need to say too much here because it's basically us just playing through at this point. As you can see from the drops, this was surprisingly tricky to actually have to avoid, because if they hit you, it's good night Vienna. You're instantly KO.
Yeah.
As I was. Yep. Okay, this one again, we needed to get the bombs to blow up the rocks.
And again, that's a bigger familiar theme in the later levels. There's a lot more pick up the bomb, blow up the rocks, which is towards the end it can be a little bit more of an irritating mechanic, but I guess it's just the way the game works.
Yes, you can tell whenever we come back, after you die, whenever you come back, it always seems to start off with the horrible round lasers. All they did is shoot forward. They are by far the worst weapon in the game. Absolutely dreadful, because they only shoot forward, they don't home. And in this game, as you'll see, you're often getting attacked from all directions. So having a weapon that just shoots forward is not very helpful in the slightest. Some careful burst dodging there. Oh, this was this horrible section where we had to run through the cavity, wasn't it? With the enemies chasing us coming out.
Yeah, that's right. No, that was next. The beats.
Yeah, well, I think it's near here. It's not this level, it's the next one, where you had those bees chasing you through.
I mean, again, you've got that sort of overground, underground feeling. I mean, from a sort of background design, these are definitely some of the blandest levels in the game. It's a very sort of rocky formation, and it can be quite boring to actually look at.
Ah, this was Dark Obstruction. Now this is my most hated level in the game, possibly. This or the final level, because this one is a real pain to play through. There's actually one section in this that's unique to this level that's bloomin' tricky to navigate, because it requires you to time your character's flight perfectly through. Sure, so you've got the your character Dragoon has at this point, Kolibri has the down shot. Yeah, that's actually quite a good weapon, but it works well when you're moving down tight corridors. When you were in open spaces, it wasn't so good. My character's got an alternative homing shot at the minute. It just seems weird, everything's natural. In fact, you've got giant scorpions and snakes, but I suppose they've done it proportion to the size of the hummingbird. The hummingbird's about 3.5 inches long, something like that. Well, certain varieties are. I'm not actually sure what variety Kolibri is, actually.
Again, there's more bombs. It's definitely one of the longer levels in the game. I think this is one of the first ones we do actually die on.
Yeah, we died quite a few times actually, but we wanted to. It's just trying to find out exactly where to go in this stage. There's a sub point in this level, so, and after that you'll see us. I think you'll see us get to the save crystal first time, and then we have a little accident midway through. So, but I thought we'd keep those intact, so you saw where we did screw up from time to time.
Indeed, I think this is the first level that actually has a save crystal in the whole game. So they are in the game, obviously they're mentioned in the manual, but they don't appear till quite late in the game. It's about level 16.
I should point out that weird octopus thing you see with the tail coming out. That's actually like an explosive thing. Basically, you have to shoot it to move it along. If you hit the tail, it basically lights up in the bomb, and then you use it to blow certain things up. Now, these red bridges, you see, they basically have to kill the enemies on them and the bridge will break. Yeah, that's the save crystal, and you see the little Kolibris go inside it.
As you can see, we're just dodging water drops once again. This is perhaps the only use of 3D graphics in this game, these kind of polygon cages. You can sort of dart through them to grab the health in there, but we didn't generally do that because obviously if you get hit by them you take damage. So.
Yeah, as you saw me just dying there. In fact, there's not actually really that much point in actually getting the health from them. I don't know whether there's some sort of special bonus for doing it, but generally I just ignored them.
I mean, there's only 2 in the game, I believe. One on this level and one on the final level, so...
I mean, there are actually a couple of weird power-ups. I had no idea what they did in Kolibri, and by all accounts, even the manual, there's not a second ending as far as I'm aware, so there's no sort of hidden or extra ending with additional cutscenes if you collect everything or do it. It just seems to be there's a few score items or something. Maybe they restore your health. Okay, these are the bomb things you see. They would shoot the tail and it blows up. We actually learned that they were just for the DNA items. So that one there wasn't actually much relevant. A few earlier, there's one particularly later. You see us fail quite miserably to blow up the area we need to.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see, this level does drag on quite a bit. We are getting close to the end of it now, though.
I think our first death here was when we attempted to go across the... basically, there's a bit coming up where you see this about the only bit in the game. There it is. There's like these wavy lines and you have to travel through them. And the first time round, I got killed by them. I remember playing this before, and I do remember that section. I got killed loads of times by it. Now this way, we're actually going the wrong direction, so you can just sort of skip forward about 10 seconds or so of video because we're not actually going the right way at that point.
Well, I mean, there are cases where you can sometimes force a game to go effectively sequence break, but this isn't one of them, so here we go. You can see this. You have to get it through perfectly, and
it's actually slightly hard to see on the video. Basically, there's wavy lines you've got to... Yeah, there we go. I think I actually dragged you. I went forward and dragged
there is a thing with this where if one player leaves the edge of the screen and is dragging the other player and they're in contact with an object, or there's any collision there, it will kill the other player.
It's like old school game mechanics. I just remember the old school games having that. A couple of them, you were too far apart, or player 1 or player 2 died. So this is quite an old... Even by about 90s, that stuff wasn't used that much, so it's kind of interesting that this game does have it. It's kind of like proper flashback to the past. I'm sure there's a few new games now that do it as well. Seeing as a lot of people on Xbox Live and PSN tend to make very retro-themed games. Not necessarily particularly well retro-themed games. They seem to get a bit enamored in what they think was the 16-bit era, and it's a slight pet hate of mine of people trying to make retro games when they don't quite understand why. The whole point during the developers during the retro era is we're trying to squeeze as much out of like the SNES, the Mega Drive, even the Saturn and the PlayStation because they were limited hardware. Whereas these days you're getting people trying to emulate it, which is why. But they're not trying to squeeze as much, they're just trying to reduce the game. So as a result, often the games just aren't anywhere near as good. And I find a lot of them, like the music, is very tinny. But if you listen here, they've done as much as possible in the music to take out tins and bangs and make it as clear, orchestra sounding as possible.
I mean, a classic example of sort of retro themes issues that shouldn't exist today is palette swap enemies, and indeed even random encounters. The thing with Final Fantasy was you had the random encounters not because that was the only combat system they could do on the NES. They couldn't have 7 or 8 sprites on screen at once because the screen would flicker, so they would start to flicker. So they had the random battle, which allowed them to have static monsters, more static monsters than the NES would have sprites, and you could fight the static monsters. And obviously, palette swaps as well, because they had limited memory on the cartridge. It was much easier just to swap the palette of a monster so that you'd have a different colour, so you could carry on playing the game with more enemies. Otherwise, if they just had normal monsters without no palette swaps, they would run out of memory very quickly. But in this day and age, especially Final Fantasy, you don't need palette swap monsters anymore. It's just a cheap, lazy way to recycle monsters in this day and age. Whereas back then, it was a necessary evil. Otherwise your game would be substantially smaller because you were so limited on RAM. It's actually, tell you one thing. Look at this. This game should have got something like a BAFTA for graphics. I know the BAFTAs didn't tend to do gaming stuff around then, and even now they're still the gaming BAFTAs are pretty naff with what they award their awards to. But this is one game that should have got BAFTA for art direction. I actually think I'm not entirely sure where Novotrade was based. I think they might have been based in Eastern Europe. I need to actually read up on where they're, but certainly they don't, well, maybe Russia or sort of southern. But it's certainly that they were I think they're a European developer. I think they are. I don't think they're a US one, and they did just some stunning games. Although I know a few of the guys that led the project were US based. But it's something that this type of game that should have been awarded and given lots of accolades, but it didn't. It just flopped, basically. Barely anyone's played. I mean, even today, there's still quite a few people want to say, have you ever played Kolibri? I mean, I've brushed up, and this is quite work for me. This is a very well-known 32X game, but there are still a lot of people out there who've never heard of this. I think there's still a lot of people out there who've never even heard of 32X, Sega Mega Drive or Genesis, purely because it was such an uncommon expansion. I mean, even at the time, I remember when it came out, and we were just like, who's going to buy this? Because it was weird. Sega America, this was primarily Sega America, an expansion, and it was just weird how the Mega CD had, despite it had some good games, and it had also flopped. It hadn't quite received the success it should have done. I think one of the reasons for that was possibly Sega should have looked to actually abandon the Mega Drive being sold on its own and purely done it as a pack-in with the Mega CD once the Mega CD was released, but they didn't, and as a result people had to buy the Mega CD separately. Now the Mega CD had some good games on it, but it just didn't have that many. I mean, it's think about 100 to about 200-300 tops. The Mega Drive has nearly 1,000 games, roughly. The 32X in total has about 30 to 40 games, roughly, its complete library. I mean, it's that small a library. It's one of the smallest commercially released. That's how much a failure it was. There's not even 50 games on the console. Maybe include versions, there is, but if you just include unique titles, then yeah, you're well. I mean, this was a disaster of a console, especially as this was Sega. This is Sega's Virtual Boy, and I'm sure you all know what flop the Virtual Boy was. The Nintendo. I mean, bizarrely, Sega even did 4 games that used the Mega CD and the 32X. I mean, no, it's 5. It's 5. There's 5. Don't forget Fahrenheit. Fahrenheit was on 2 discs and actually came with 5, but there are 5 games that support it. I mean, how well must those games sell? They must have been terrible. But, I mean, the 32X alone, I mean, how many people? I know we actually have the Mega CD and 32X, and actually the thing, it looks quite a beast when you have all 3 plugged in. But, I mean, who did back in the day actually have all 3? Not many people at all. If you paid for the 32X, you might be pretty steamed by the fact there were just no games released for it. But certainly a lot of the video ones did get released on the Saturn as well, so with vastly improved quality.
Yeah, Corpse Killer got a Saturn version. Although Saturn didn't get a European release, it did get a US release. The Saturn video is much better than a few others. But not all of them did. You didn't get Saturn port Night Trap. Although why did one play Night Trap? Terrible game. That game just went down infamy for being responsible for age ratings. Although because of age ratings, they now could just make it the most violent video games possible, as a couple did say.
Bringing in the age ratings basically took off the cap which the self-imposed cap developers had before.
So it shows you how stupid some of the politicians are.
Given that Night Trap itself doesn't have any kind of CD content in there, there's no nudity, even though people speculated there was. There's nothing of the sort in there.
Yeah, it's a relatively
tame game.
Certainly the video in it, I mean, yeah, you see the girl getting dragged away, but in comparison to the amount of things I've seen on TV, I mean, the amount of films that are just really, really violent the games could never do. It's just, so whenever I hear the whole games and violent video games, I always just think these guys are talking trash. There's far more worse you can watch on TV, and often it goes into really realistic detail that you wouldn't see in a video game, because graphics are nowhere near that good as gets. Although saying that, I've not yet seen a TV series about hummingbirds, so if someone wants to, Kolibri, well, you never know. Get the old Sega license. But as you can tell, we've kind of wandered off on a slight tangent because these sections are quite boring. I mean, there's not much to say at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, it's still exploring dark brown cave. Unfortunately, I believe this is coming near the end. In fact, this is the one with the beat chase coming up. Yeah, this is probably one of the most interesting bits and tricky bits. We learned doing this section that the bee chase, which comes up, is not designed to be done in 2-player. It's one of the few stages where clearly they intended it to be done single-player only. So 2-player might have been added in later on, I suspect, in the development, because this section is clearly designed for single-player, not 2-player. Yep, here we go. Right, basically, if you come down a little bit, we're going to... Okay, so there's the next bomb we'll destroy. I believe this is the chase scene. Yep, there's the save point, so as we go along...
I think we died here the first time. I'm pretty sure we have one death in this bit.
Yep, so here we go. You might not even be able to see them, but there are some small bees that as...
No, they're not on screen just yet. They are slightly small. They appear in a few stages. They're really irritating enemies. You can't actually kill them. They basically just fly straight at you. But basically, unless in 2-player mode, unless you're flying in tandem, one of you is going to get stung to death by these things. It's basically like a chase section. Yep. Yep, there
we go.
There
they are. As you chase forward now, the wall comes down and the bees go after you. Now, this is, as we said, badly designed for 2 players, because even if you both race, one of you will be killed at this point.
As you see there, while Dragoon's is taking a hit, it pulls the screen and I can't move forward.
So yep, being chased by the bees, and you can see the other unfortunately, because they're being constantly chased and hit, they're fading out as well because of the lack of 60 frames that usually doesn't support. We get to the end. I mean, it doesn't. This section is badly designed for 2 players. It was probably when the game was tested. They probably only tested it in the 1-player environment.
Yeah, it's normally the case.
Just talking from experience here, often multiplayer co-op play isn't tested as thoroughly as the single player is.
Yeah, generally doing testing is a lot more single player thing, because basically you want multiple people doing playthroughs. Having 2 testers do co-op playthroughs means you lose out on a playthrough, so often they do, although multiplayer is done, it's not done as rigorously as it should be, which is often why you get a lot of nasty bugs in multiplayer games, because there's just not a lot of test companies just don't do it properly. In fact, a lot of developers don't do it properly, period. They're too concerned with pushing it out to get released on time, not actually make sure the product is completely finished and above and to a decent standard.
I mean, when it comes to looking at this sort of games for testing purposes, if the game's tested in-house, it's usually better. If the game's tested by outsource testers, then you're in a whole world of hurt.
Yeah, see, we're back above ground now. Now this is sort of like the jungle area. This is the prelude to the temple area, so...
That's the last scrolling level in the game?
No, I think there's one more after this. Could be wrong. Yeah, I think we
Oh,
did
well,
2.
infection is yeah, this is the last.
This is the last. This is also the last above ground level, bar 1. Because I think next we start going into the temple itself. So basically, enjoy the tree visuals. This is the last stage, because coming up shortly is the incredibly boring and long temple stage. So boring. You might as well, when you get too much, just skip to the final boss at the end.
Not bad. Yeah. So, I mean, there is the sort of over theme in the game. You've travelled from the sort of healthy forest into the infected forest, and now you're travelling towards the sort of final temple area where the game's climax begins. I mean, these scrolling levels are reminiscent of quite a few side-scrolling shooters.
They remind me more of sort of Europe. This does remind me sort of European scrolling shooters over Japanese ones. There's a far more. It's hard to describe.
I suppose it's
sort of like games like Project X and
Apathy on the Amiga.
like the one with the hour. There's a side gnosis game.
It's Agony.
I
think Aphid, which was speed shoot 'em up. In fact, done on the Amiga. It was done by a European team. They made it look like it was a Japanese shooter. This is the first level where we fight the snakes. Now this level is a little bit of a pain, as you have to actually push one of the bomb containers quite a long way to detonate it. And as you'll see, we had several unsuccessful attempts at getting the bomb to the intended target area.
Several being a slight understatement. It was pretty disastrous. I think we actually died about twice here, so I've cut them out. But yeah, this is. But as you can see from here, there are a few unfortunate incidences with the bombs.
Basically, you've got to shoot the orange ball. Here we go. Shoot it again.
This is just not working in tandem.
But unfortunately, if you hit the wrong part like that, you trigger the destination sequence, and in this case, it killed Riven. So there I go to revive him and get some more gun power-ups. Basically, the homing shots I found were the best for this, so again we try. And that was a much quicker fail.
This was actually quite irritating, but it's not something you would normally see in a Japanese shooter. You would never see something like this, so it's interesting to see a team do something like this.
It's more an exploratory system, because obviously in an arcade-based shooter it's level to level, kill as many enemies and the boss, usually against the time limit as well. Okay, so here we go with another attempt. I think this might actually be the final attempt. This is the time we do it. Okay, yep, this is the one. So, no,
it's not. It's not. It's coming now. I think it's like the next one up. We did it. I think I just let you do all the action.
Yeah,
so
because you kept shooting it and triggering it.
Oh, don't blame me. Don't blame me. I was handling this game very well. It's just this bit was a bit tricky.
Yep.
I could include your failures, by the way, in this video, so we can bask in our gloriousness of not succeeding in video games.
No. Yeah, I appreciate those of you watching and thinking, what on earth are they doing? By now, you're probably thinking, I think we've had about 5 minutes of this. Right, this is the final run. Here we go. Shoot it up and along. And it does take quite a while to get there, so on your first couple of plays you probably would have trouble with this bit. And then I think we get it to the target area, and it's the one time once you get it to the target area we then have trouble detonating it.
I feel like doing Indiana Jones music at this point. Da 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 da.
Yep. And bang, and there she glows, and that takes out that area there. Now, of course, if you shoot it in some angles, you have to actually destroy 2 blocks, or otherwise you're not going to get down. And here's the kind of wasp hornet thing that you follow before.
Yeah, we have to follow him to the end of the level. I think the end of the level just literally... It's actually a really, really short level, because they clearly knew.
And this makes up Extraction, which is the penultimate level of the game. Basically, the remainder of this game is large temple areas where you're having to get lots of bomb power-ups and shoot the enemy, obviously kill all the enemies.
This level was relatively about normal size. The next level is colossal. The next level probably should have been split into a couple more stages.
Yeah, I mean, the final boss battle, I think that would have been better if it had been siphoned off the level and was in a separate area after you did the level.
It's quite an underwhelming boss battle, even in single player. It's not. You get this far and then there's this quite weak boss battle. It's not that hard. I mean, the level preluding the boss battle is far. So it's much harder to get to the boss than it is to actually fight and defeat the boss.
And as like the cave levels, there are an awful lot of pick up the bombs to destroy the brown rocks throughout the course of this level. I mean, I don't think there's one new enemy introduced in this level which you have to fight, which is like a sort of walker blob. But that's about it. The rest of the time you're fighting bees, wasps, and giant snakes. I say giant snakes, but they're probably only snakes that would be similar size to what a hummingbird is, because obviously in real life hummingbirds are just very small mammals. No, they're not mammals.
Although the scorpions are giant, you wouldn't get...
Not mammals. Hummingbirds are not mammals. And this is one of the new boss creatures here. Basically, you have to destroy it, and it moves very slowly along, and these are quite tedious.
I think the
fights.
only enemy that's disproportionate size is the scorpion, because the hummingbirds are about 3.5 inches. So if the scorpion was as big as that, it would be about a 2-foot scorpion with like a 1-foot tail, so which would be quite a menacing prospect if there was a scorpion that big. If you say, oh, it's a giant scorpion there, yeah, I'm just going to run in the other direction now.
Although, in real life, the truth is, the bigger the scorpion is, the less venomous its tail is. So, if you do get stung by a big scorpion in real life, you're usually going to be safer off than if you get stung by a smaller scorpion. Although there is one exception to the rule. There is one large scorpion that is highly venomous. So,
bit of interesting wildlife facts for you there.
I mean, that arm thing you see there is very irritating, and they appear throughout the final 2 levels. They just sort of move around, and they are surprisingly hard to dodge. You will take damage from them.
Yeah, I could not work out the pattern for them. It was very odd. At this point, we are actually going in the wrong direction. When we killed that blob thing, it triggers bombs to spawn at the area where you kill the blob thing, but they didn't appear initially because we had to leave off screen and go back on. So instead, what we do is we go back to where we'd previously got the bombs, got them, and then fly backwards.
Now, if you just saw there, we actually fired the bombs off, not because we wanted to, because they're actually a pre-scripted trigger at that point. So if you go past that point, you can't keep the older bombs. So there we go, there are the new ones. That we could have saved ourselves 3 minutes of video had we waited, but there is an irritation with this. Things won't spawn on screen. You have to fly off screen and then go back. It's like in earlier sections, if you use up the bombs, you have to fly. If you stay where they are, they won't reappear. You've got to fly back to where they are. Fly off screen, then fly back.
This does hurt one of my old pet hates of enemies respawning after you leave screen. Not in every level, but there are a few levels where if you go off screen and then go back, the enemies respawn. I mean, Mega Man is another classic example. You use that. Lots of old games used it because they couldn't remember. They didn't have enough memory to remember what enemies you killed. So literally, as soon as you go on screen, off screen, stuff like Ninja Gaiden. It was a really bad, dated gameplay mechanic, and games that still use it, because I know I've seen a few retro-themed games. Unless you use it very, very carefully, it's almost always an incredibly bad mechanic to dig back up.
And this incidentally is the final level of the game, Remission, which I suppose there is a sort of a cancerous thing has a cure for disease, so you've reached the end part where we're actually going to cure the planet now.
Yeah,
it's kind of a theme in the level names.
Yeah, there is an odd theme running through the level names. It's not a Japanese thing either, so but it's not something.
I mean, they all seem to be named around, like, initially it's like plains, forest, then you get the infected, then you get almost like the disease and the fact you're trying to cure it.
And then, of course, you are the cure to save the world. Just moving this blob thing around again. As you can see, this is quite grating. I think we died once to this part here, because this one actually comes up from behind you, and previously we hadn't kept them far enough apart, so we were getting absolutely shot to pieces.
Yeah, basically you actually moved this forward by shooting it, and in a previous attempt to cut out, we hadn't pushed this one forward that much, so the other one was right behind us, so we had to dodge both. Of course, that made it quite tricky. So here we go, it spawns, shoot it, it dies, and I think the other one comes after you as well now, so finish that bad boy off. I mean, there are lots of, you'll probably notice the rings, there are lots of them cluttered throughout the level, and obviously, as they act as a shield, they are a very handy piece of item to pick up.
Yeah, pretty much. This level is kind of like a maze. Have you ever seen like long plays? You'll see people shoot through these type of levels, and I didn't really. One of the reasons we did the TruePlay is we wanted to show far more reflection of the game in the explorative side and things like that. Because often a few of the long plays I've seen, there's a couple where the guys are out and out cheating, and they're just zooming through the game and not exploring it properly. So you actually miss out on quite a lot of the game and some interesting sections. You're also not seeing a true reflection of the game, because you're seeing someone take a specific route who's played it time after time after time. And if you're doing a speed run, that's fine. That's what I expect. I expect you to go the fastest route possible to finish the game, because that's what I want to see. When I'm watching someone just play through a game, I expect to see a far more open, enjoyable run. I don't want to necessarily see a run where some guy does it without taking a hit, because I've seen a few like that where someone's Capcom scrolling beat 'em ups, and I'm just like, that's not right. That's not right. You can't go through those games without taking hits.
You know, they've edited that video, they've been using save states almost constantly, and as soon as they take any kind of minor hit, they then revive the save state. Well, in this case, again, we recorded it from the original format, so those options aren't available to us. Indeed, one of the big problems with emulators is very rarely do they emulate the games perfectly. There's always often minor glitches or graphical issues, even collision issues in some cases. So when you get people doing full playthroughs, oh yeah, I've done this, well, in reality, you wouldn't be able to do this on the original cartridge, because it's just not possible.
I mean, yeah, unless, well, you can often do it, but you need to spend weeks, months, even years practicing, depending on the game. The thing I find about this is that Kolibri is actually, certainly if you play it on emulator, the sound isn't right from what I've seen. The sound is definitely not correct, because the 32X has not been, primarily because of the Mega Drive hardware. There's some sound chips in the Mega Drive that no one's been able to properly emulate, so the sound is always off in the emulated versions, which is a shame, because the Mega Drive actually is a really good sound chip. It delivered some really great 16-bit tunes during the era.
And supposedly sound emulation issues were the reasons why some Mega Drive games didn't get ported to the Wii, notably the Thunder Force games. Because obviously Sega did release quite a lot of Virtual Console games for the Wii, but Thunder Force wasn't one of them, and supposedly the way in which it emulated the sound hardware wasn't acceptable enough for the final games.
I take it they haven't done, Sega haven't actually done the Wii U Mega Drive games, which is interesting. It must mean that the Wii U still isn't doing that well. I'm interested to see now that Mario Kart's come out, whether that's actually going to turn the tide for the Wii U or not, because I'd quite like to see a lot more Nintendo-based older games getting released on the Wii U, but at the minute Nintendo's output has been somewhat limited. I mean, there's no reason why they couldn't release games like Kolibri on the Wii U and stuff. I don't understand Nintendo and Sega's logic behind a lot of this. I mean, 32X, you should not, I would have thought Sega might have emulated at least for this. This and Chaotix are probably
they've never Sega themselves have never produced 32X emulators, so I mean even
Fusion is probably one of the better emulators for it. Yep, and then we got Eaten by the Plant there. I mean, I'm sorry to say there's no Mega CD games emulated. The only one although tell a lie, there's no general emulator as far as we're officially available, but Sonic CD was released on PSN, and I think it was released on PC and a few other things, and Xbox Live,
and the Sonic Gems collection as well. And that was the Sonic Gems was the Mega CD, whereas some of the other versions had the PC port, because obviously the PC version had better intros than the Mega CD version.
There was always some debate over why Sonic CD was actually not included in Sonic Jam on the Sega Saturn. I think you see this stage is really, really, really long and really boring now. It's starting to, even rewatching it by the commentary, I mean, when we've edited out, but playing it was just horrid. It's just like, where do we go? You just kind of get a sense of where you're going, but it just feels like you're treading old ground. I'm very much reminded of the Halo library stage, which is, if you play Halo, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. That is possibly one of the worst levels. It's just copy and pasting. Basically, the level design library was just copy paste. So it looks. I mean, if you turn around and start going the wrong way, you can literally walk back to the start of the level and not realise it because it's just identical whichever way you go.
I think this is near the end now with the snake.
The snakes are actually they're not that menacing enemy. The big enemies are quite easy to kill, so.
And probably the ones you have to be more careful of, things like the chameleons and toad, which you couldn't kill, that could eat you down in one go. But obviously once you get to this point in the game, you've long since seen the last of them, so. And indeed, the plants in this stage are the only enemy that can kill you in one hit. So. In this, we've both got the homing power up now. This is probably one of the better guns for this level. It homes on everything. So.
Well, there's three homing weapons, but this one's the fast firing homing weapon. It doesn't three-way split, but it really goes. It's also far better at homing than a few of the others.
So obviously now we're inside that sort of pyramid structure you've seen earlier. Again, that's the only time I think any kind of 3D polygons are used in the game with that sort of rotation effect.
Yeah, the box claims the entire game is in 3D. Yeah. Yeah, just let the game audio play a bit. think we're kind of getting near the end now. I mean, it's an enjoyable game. It's worth playing. If you're a shooter fan, it is a beautiful, beautiful game. I mean, I'm not going to be writing a review. There are a few things I do like about this, a few things I don't. Primarily, I really do like the game overall. I mean, it's interesting when you look at some of the other randomised game reviews, kind of chronologically putting the games in order of whether I like them or don't like them. I think by far the worstest game so far we've reviewed is Turok. Turok is a terrible, terrible N64 game. I think Donkey Kong Lands 2 wasn't that much better. I mean, even Rampage Puzzle... I'm just trying to work out whether I disliked Rampage Puzzle Attack more than I disliked Turok. I think Turok was probably one of the worst FPSs I've played in a long time. This is another part where we fail spectacularly again, where we dashed ahead of the thing and he starts attacking us, so we had to go back. We tried to see if we could lure him back up, and then we gave up and went all the way back round again.
It's actually a poor gameplay element, because as soon as you get in front of the enemy, he stops what he's supposed to be doing. He just starts flying around. It's almost like it's a bug, because he doesn't directly attack you, and he doesn't then proceed back to the area where he's supposed to be, so it kind of leaves you in limbo, so you have to fly away from him.
Yeah, he should have just carried on his preset path always, and if you just touched him,
he should directly attack the player. See, now he's disappeared, and we can go, because again, you can't get through those spikes.
So we have to go all the way back. And again, it's not good to touch them, as you see, you take damage there. But yeah,
but obviously at this point in the game, you know you're getting near the end, because all the enemies start giving you lots of health. And obviously, because they're giving you lots of health, you think, okay, we must be near the boss battle. Fortunately, there is quite a lot of health at the final boss battle, and the sort of defensive barrier magic rings. So here he goes, he comes back again. I think we cocked up this time as well. Yep, he's trying to kill us again. So we fly away, fly back,
and attempt no through.
I think we've been doing this level now for 11 minutes screen time. This is by far the longest level in the game. It does drag quite a bit. The developers probably should have broken it down a bit, perhaps into one or two more games. You could have split this into 3 levels and it been a bit more tolerable.
I think it's the word we were all looking for there. So I think this is actually the first 2D shooter we've reviewed as well for Randomised Gaming. To pronounce it, Randomised Gaming, for the US guys out there who are wondering. Randomised is spelled with an S. I'm not sure why it's spelled with a Z in America. I'm not, but yeah, we're English, so Randomised are... No, I can't even spell it right there, so I'm not even going to try there at the minute, because trying to think of spelling and commentating, not a good idea. But basically, yeah, it's spelled with an S. It's M-I-S-E-D at the end, rather than M-I-Z-E-D at the end, which is the American spelling. So that's why I'm pronouncing it Randomised. Well, the US version, I always thought Randomised. You've got a mize there with an S, not got a Z in there. I never quite got why the US version's got Z, but the weird thing is I'm using a program to just read through the text whenever I'm writing the reviews, and that program is... I've only just recently started using it. It's actually really helpful. But that program, I can only listen to an American voice, so I keep thinking, randomise! I'm like, no, it's randomise, get it right, pronounce it right. But yeah, this is they're rubbing their eyes there. This is boring you to tears, I see. This is incredibly long.
It wasn't that fun to play through this particular section. I think it does let the game down.
Yeah,
the length of it does.
It really does drag. It's not It's designed to be some sort of epic labyrinth, but I mean, like the bits where the boulders come down, they're about one of the few unique bits of this level. They're quite nice, but there's not enough of them, and you expect a bit more of them using mechanics like that for this level, like being chased by boulders and
other enemies. Yeah, you could have had sections where you were chased by much larger creatures. I mean, there's no enemy. I mean, really, the sort of snake is the only sort of Egyptian-style enemy in this level. They don't introduce any other new enemies, which would have been nice if it has more themed, like a scarab beetle or something like that are more themed with the kind of temples.
Yeah, I mean,
dung beetles as well, because they have more sort of relation with the hot country, so you would expect to see a variety in enemies. Perhaps maybe even the developers sort of run out with ideas at this point and decided
either they've run out of ideas or they were running low on space. I'm not sure how big the actual cartridge for Kolibri is, so they may have been running low on space, or they may have been running to a tight deadline. It's hard to say, but at this point, certainly this looks like a studio. This last level looks like a studio that's run out of steam or is trying to get it done in a hurry. There are hallmarks here of that kind of thing. It's still a very nice polished product. Yep, these are the boulder I was saying earlier. Just the bit where we go back on ourselves, I think it's it. We realise we missed out bombs. Have to go all the way back around again. So apologies if you're watching this thinking, why have they got to there? It's like, oh damn it, we haven't got any bombs. Gonna have to try again. Yep, so there's that wire basically leads to the boss. So in this instance we hadn't got the bombs, so we now have to go back and find where they are. One of the irritations with these sort of larger levels is you're not entirely sure where you should be going. I mean, it does give a kind of explorative side to the level, but it can also be quite frustrating if you end up going the wrong ways and not finding what you want. Dodging there. I really hate those mechanical things. There's no sort of preset thing to them. They just sort of swing at you. They didn't seem to have any logical pattern. They were just really hard to avoid. There's another bit where you've got to be both flying in tandem there, because you just saw, if I'd been a bit further behind, I would have been knocked out by that boulder. And that's weird. There's a couple of save crystals, all really close proximity in this state, and I don't know why. So you get long gaps of save crystals, then them in close proximity. It doesn't quite read like they'd finished tweaking through the level design. There are bits where you should have had the save crystals, and bits where you don't get them, and then bits where you get a couple of them all together in tandem. So again, we've got two save crystals in really, really close proximity, and there's me dying again spectacularly. You have to try and edit out any hay-feed breathing I spot during this. I've actually been sneezing prior to recording this, so apologies if you hear slightly cough, wheeze or stuff in the background. But yeah, we've just got the bombs now, so now we go all the way back to where we were, and then we can go fight the final boss. It's nearly there. There's a teeny bit more after this, but yeah, we're nearly there. It's like, we've seen the light and now it's time to stop the evil. This is probably, as I said before, this level does drag quite heavily. You really want homing weapons as well for this, or the ones that bounce off the wall, because of this tight confinement, you do get enemies just flying at you. That said, it's not too hard, even on normal difficulty. I didn't find it that hard at all. This was a very, very easy game, very short as well. I mean, if you'd have paid 50 quid back in the day, you'd be quite angry. And I know Kolibri goes for quite a bit now, so if you were to even pay like, the thing is between about 50 to 100 pounds, so you get a good game for your money. You don't get a very long game for your money, that's for sure. Yeah, it's probably much faster. You can complete this much faster than you can Echo the Dolphin. Oh, Echo the Dolphin is really quite long and laborious game. Even Star Wars Arcade I was playing last night on the 32X, and that's surprisingly hard to play through some of the stages, and I found it much, much harder to Kolibri. I mean, Star Wars Arcade is only a couple of levels, but it's a far harder game to finish and actually get to the end, and you really have to put some skill into it. So you need a bit of luck for Star Wars Arcade as well. I think there is some control issues with Star Wars Arcade. It's not control, it's just like, the enemies will just sit behind you for ages. It's just random whether they kind of move in front of you or move behind you, the TIE fighters. So it's slightly irritating, but it's a nice 32X game. I think T-Mech, I'm quite surprised how good that is. Some people might be thinking, wow, T-Mech. No, I don't have a PAL version. US version works fine on a European console, so I've got a US one. Because the US one's like $10, $20, whereas the PAL versions like £1,000. I was like, yeah, I'll go for the $10-20 one. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the PAL version of T-Mech, because the US version was published by Sega in the US, if the PAL copies that you see were ex-US copies that were reboxed and repackaged by Sega because they didn't sell them in the US, which might explain why it's got such a limited print run. Is that basically they took a load of US cartridges, just took off the stickers, chucked away the boxes, then just did European boxes for them, because the cart itself is region free. In fact, as far as I'm aware, it works on all 3 regions, although I've not tested it on a Japanese one, but I've tested my US copy on a European machine, unmodded as well, I should say, and it works fine. But do always double check prior to buying.
With the 32X, the majority of the games are region locked. There are a few that work fine, but you should always err on the side of caution with the 32X, because a lot of the games are region locked. Super Tempo will not work on a PAL region 32X, which is a shame, because that is definitely one of the better 32X games.
Yeah, that was one 32X game that should have got a European release. That did. There's like Blackthorn as well. Blackthorn's a brilliant Blizzard game, although it did get SNES release. Not sure if it got a Mega Drive release, but in Europe, but it definitely got a SNES release in Europe. I've got a Super Nintendo copy. That's really good. Well, the 32X one, I'm not overly keen. Okay, so
this is the boss.
Yes, the final boss, as I'm talking over myself. This first off, you have to blow the guns up.
Done very quickly. I should say this game is a lot easier in 2-player than it is in single player.
The final boss isn't that hard. In fact, you'll just see us kill it. So after you blow up the guns, you then have this like slug-like thing shooting at you, Again, there's lots of shields, so literally just shoot.
Obviously, as we've got homing shots, we're not too fussed about where we shoot, because we know our bullets are roughly going to hit the target.
Yeah, you can literally fly off screen and be shooting at it as long as you've got the shield and just dodging its attacks, which we weren't doing particularly well there. And then we go back, get some more shield. I mean, it's surprising how easy this boss is. It really is. I think before I just stayed away from it, just used the homing shot, and the homing shot starts to target the enemy.
It is a bit of an anticlimax, to be honest. In fact, we probably should have flown around and just shown you the full size of it. But
it's tiny. It's just got It's got like dragon head tentacles, and then it's
this is the last bit. It chucks out flames. It's exploding. There we go.
There's the dark crystal, which is a tiny little thing that chucks out a little flamethrower, and then it chucks out bugs at you. And we just shoot it till it dies, and it's going to die any second now.
Because it doesn't take a bit. There we go. Kolibri is finished.
And there we go. We've saved the world. Everything's hunky dory. Should we finish the commentary here and let you listen to the credit music?
Yeah. I think there isn't really much at all for the ending. A couple of little birds flying around, off they go.
We've saved the world. Hey hey. Congratulations, you've saved the world. Now, just start another game where you do exactly the same. Okay, this is Randomised Gaming, signing up. All the best, folks, everyone. And we'll see you soon in the next TruePlay.